Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. First hour is general discussion about virtual production and media production. Second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. Today, we're going to talk about, we're going to do Ruthless Reviews. We were supposed to do HDR Ruthless Reviews. We had a little bit of a technical issue last night, so we're working through that. Poor Kevin and I were, when we were supposed to be watching fireworks, we were trying to figure out why some pipeline stuff wasn't working. So we're going to punt until a future week, but we'll still go through this and talk a little bit about it. So stay tuned for that. All right, let's go ahead and jump into the questions. Mitch, what do we got?
Thanks, Alex. Our first question is in from Robert Shoji in Los Angeles, California. For voiceover work, what hardware recorders do the panelists recommend and why?
Good, Courtney.
Well, I used to use my Sound Devices 744T, which has great preamps, but the problem is it records to compact flash and its internal hard drive, and so then you have to dump the stuff out into the computer to edit it. So nowadays I use the also Sound Devices MixPre 3 because it has a USB interface, and I can record it as well into Audacity or some other musical work or some other audio workstation at the same time.
Go ahead, Carl.
So I'm going to suggest if you're starting out, this is probably the best bet. So the UV1, which is new from Behringer, it's a high-end, it's probably their highest-end audio interface as far as high-quality Midas preamps. It has a bypass, so if you just want the preamp only, you can use that. The rest of the stuff here is just like a DS or another stuff you'd use for a voice channel. And the B2 is Behringer's 7th or 8th generation now, U87 clone. So it's pretty good. But this is if you're starting out. If you don't want to spend too much money, you want to get into it, this is still pretty high quality stuff.
Now, does that UV1 have a recorder on it as a hardware?
It's USB out. So USB
so
audio
you
interface.
still need a computer to do that.
Yes, you still need a computer to do this one.
Hey, go ahead, Mitchell.
And alone, I have an old Tascam. I'd like to use a MixPre. I'm thinking about getting one soon. And I don't know if this breaks the rule of the question, but I like the Audio Science audio cards on a PC running into Adobe Audition. So that's how I record with a little software assist on it.
Go ahead, Bill.
I do it two ways, depending on whether or not I want the convenience of my normal workflow for voiceover. If I do that, then I take my laptop and I take the Universal Audio Apollo Solo I'm speaking through right now, and I do that, but that's only because I like recording voiceovers in Final Cut because of the features it has. It has a voiceover module and other things that make it easy to work with. Honestly, I've done probably 75% of the voiceovers that I've done on the road in hotel rooms and stuff like that directly into a Zoom H4n, and no one has ever rejected one of them. I take a good mic with me, plug it in there, baffle as well as I can, and they've all gotten me paid.
Go ahead, HypeMiC.
Yeah, we do videos very frequently, almost daily. So we do voiceovers almost on a daily basis. We have a little booth that we built, and my team uses a Focusrite and plug it directly into a laptop with Logic. So they record it directly into Logic and then manages from there onwards.
Yeah, and I use a MixPre 3 or a Scorpio. MixPre 3 is all you would need, in my opinion. Really quiet preamps, a lot of control, and the ability to both record into the computer as well as into the hardware device, which I like a lot. They're hard to get now, so you might have to get a slightly larger one until the supply chain loosens up a little bit. Next question.
Next question coming in from me, and I'm looking for a straight Sony monitor, 55 or bigger, that just displays video with no smart TV garbage. What does the panel suggest?
Go ahead, Nigel. Can't hear you, Nigel.
The hardest is no garbage because practically all these things come with smart TVs or Google TVs or something, but you don't have to use them. Sony Bravia, I think, are the high end. 55 is a really strange size as it happens. Nobody really wants to sell you a 55. They want to sell you a 65, 75, and 85. Well, you can get a very nice 100 from Sony for about $10,000.
That's come down a lot.
Yeah, it has. They actually have come down a lot. And I think the high-end 100 is OLED, and I would try and steer away from OLED. I think the mini OLEDs are better. And again, the other thing about OLED you have to watch out if you're going to keep a constant image, it is going to burn in. And they'll tell you can get rid of it, but you really can't. So I think you first have to decide how big a monitor do you want. 55 is probably small, 65, 75, or 85 is easier. Then you have to decide you want 4K, 8K, do you not care? And I think once you work those things out, the rest will work itself out for you.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah. If you really want to get a 55, there is a Sony PVMX 550. It's been discontinued, so you might have to find some new old stock. It's $27,810. Doesn't have any junk because it's just a monitor, but it's an OLED 4K SR Live, does HDR, and
it's got a lot of control, too.
It'll make your wallet a lot thinner.
Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
I would be concerned about trying to run HDR on an OLED because it just doesn't have the ability to punch that brightness up. But I'll let Carl answer that question.
This one does. It takes those extra $27,000 to get it up to the brightness.
Exactly. You can have this much, but the plug costs you this. I meant 55 or larger, not at 55. I'm just trying to set the starting point. But
I can buy
my big complaint is you can't drive 55. That's
can't
Sammy
buy
Hagar.
55.
Thank you.
Exactly.
I just noticed the other day. I mean, I've got all these Sony TVs, and they're good ones. I just hate all that smart TV stuff. I just want to plug something into it and have it work every time without navigating monitors. That's my problem.
Go ahead, Carl.
So yeah, the one I'm going to suggest is going to be a Sony, but because I own a Sony, I know how to turn off all the Google stuff because Android is the base layer that the TVs run on now. So the one I'd suggest would be the 85K. This is the best bang for the buck. It has two 4K 120 hertz inputs. So a lot of them have one, but this one actually has two. So watches HDMI 2.1, as people may know it. So out of the four inputs, two of them are 120 hertz capable. What you need to do is don't sign into Google on this TV. Don't hook it up to the internet. And then when you can actually go into one of the menus and you can actually turn off everything you see on what's called the home screen. So you can customize your home screen and you can turn off all the little apps. So all you see are the inputs, the four inputs or five inputs if you're using analog. So, but you have to go in and kind of essentially hide everything else that shows up in the home app, that's when you turn it on. Generally, you'll see that. If you hide all that stuff and don't sign in and don't put it on the internet, you'll only see the four inputs, and that's how you get rid of all the cruff that you don't want to see. And
I usually get a new TV about every 4 or 5 years. It's kind of my business. I would normally do it that high rate, and so I usually think about what am I going to watch for the next 4 or 5 years when I buy it. And so I'm in that process right now, and I'm pretty close to getting I think an 85-inch 4K is kind of where I'm leaning towards. I just don't know how much content there'll be in 8K. I just don't, I think it's going to take, as someone who produces 8K content, I'm like, this is really hard, and it's hard to distribute. It's hard to make work. It's hard to, so I think that we're still 2 or 3 years away from 8K. So I think if you get an 8K, you're probably paying more than you need to, because you're not going to, even with the upscale, I think 4K at 85, and I think you really have to be at 85 or larger before 8K makes sense anyway, because you're not going to see it's not going to resolve for you anyway at any normal viewing angle or viewing distance. So I think that 85 is a really good. That's what I'm looking to put in my living room is 85, just making sure that it supports Dolby IQ is kind of what I'm looking for, is to make sure that the Dolby IQ and HDR10 Plus are the two that I want to make sure that it supports. As far as getting rid of the cruft or the debris on that comes with the TV, I just don't ever see it, and I think that's because I'm plugged into an Apple TV all the time, so I don't have any like it turns on and the Apple TV turns on. I don't see anything else. And so I just don't see a lot of that stuff because I just don't have it interact with anything else. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, every once in a while, my OLED TV, I got like an 80-inch OLED Sony. Every once in a while, I lose the remote, and it comes up with the screen, and I gotta get the HDMI one, and it's driving me crazy. Yeah. The other thing I noticed,
I just don't use the remote either. I don't actually have a working remote for my TV. Like I literally just turn it on from the side, and then I have my Apple TV, and then I don't.
I'd love to do that. And by the way, in support of what you just said about Apple TV, my friend that works at the local Best Buy in their Magnolia suite, which is their high-end stuff, he says they sell all TVs with Apple TV. That's what they're recommending for the interface.
It simplifies life a lot. And again, one of the reasons TV costs what they cost is because they're selling data back. If you're using that interface, they're selling data back. I mean, they're collecting data. Like that's the reason that they can offset the cost. So you actually want the TV to come with the cruft because that paid for part of the TV. so anyway, Nigel.
Yeah, I should correct the 100-inch is actually $17,000. It was the 85-inch 8K that was $10,000. The other thing I would tell you, if people are looking for a television for their living room that doesn't need to be the same quality monitor, the most popular thing at the moment for us is the Samsung frame TVs, which are the art TVs that when you power off, it throws some art up. And, that saves you having a big black hole in the wall of your living room.
We have our Apple TV is set to when it doesn't do anything, it goes and grabs a photo library, and I have like a family photo library that I just throw images into, and it does exactly that. It just plays, and my family, my wife specifically loves it. So I keep on trying to add more to it. Go ahead, Courtney.
Also, the Fire Stick 4K does the same thing, and Prime Day's coming up next week, so pick up a couple for $25 a piece.
All right, next question.
Next question in from Josh Kaufman, and he's in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and he wants to know, content identified as copyright applicable on a YouTube channel, music, video, excerpts, etc., results in consequences from being disqualified for monetization to copyright strike. Are there reasons for holding said content? Then there's a list there.
Good, Courtney.
Well, yes, if you're doing a review channel where you're reviewing music videos or reviewing films, you want to show the trailers from the films, for example, and you don't want to get a copyright strike so that you can leave it up so it won't be, set off to the black hole of YouTube where no one can see it. You can demonetize it, and that way people can see it and you can review stuff and talk about it with copyrighted material on it under the fair use law.
Yeah, I have not seen a strike in a long time. I do think that there are certain bands, and there's a handful of kind of it's at this point it's a little backwards. As far as you don't see that many people doing that, but it's like the Eagles and a couple other ones are very aggressive about their copyright, and so almost everybody has gone to demonetization, as Courtney talked about there. So. What you do is you put that stuff up and you let it. I usually put stuff that I'm worried about onto what I call a burner channel, just to see. It's not my YouTube channel. It is my YouTube channel, but it's not the main one. I put it on and let it sit for a couple of days just to make sure that I know what's going to happen. Now YouTube has a way to preview it now, but I'm very superstitious. I just have been doing it the same way for a decade. So I just throw it up there to see what happens. And then if all I get is I never monetize anything on YouTube. So if all it does is demonetize, I'm like, oh, fine, I'll put it up there. So that's kind of my approach to it. I think I've talked to different YouTubers about it. Some are very attached to they don't want it ever to be demonetized, so they worry about it. Others just see I'm producing a bunch of content. Some of it makes money, some of it doesn't. And the ones that don't make money are attracting more viewers that mean that I make more money on the other ones. So they have a much more kind of pragmatic view of that approach. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asked, I've connected my Roland Fantom-06 to an Elektron Analog Heat MkII for saturation. Even with minus 15 LUFS on WLM and at minus 12 to minus 6 on my interface, listening to a direct recording on my car stereo sounds weak, and I have to turn it up excessively. Why?
Good, Carl.
So essentially, with the Elektron like this and the other similar things like essentially a sonic enhancer, that's what it is. What you're doing is you're actually changing the harmonic structure at certain parts of the waves. So what a saturation does is when it gets close to distortion. So when it gets close to peak volume, it actually changes the harmonics at those peak volumes only, but it won't change the harmonics at something that's medium volume. So it's not actually going to change the volume. It's not going to make stuff louder. This is not a loudness war machine. That's not what it is. What this is, it's changing harmonics and it's changing phase and EQ a little bit via analog circuitry, which is used to be found in tape machines. So the way tape machines were, there was only a certain amount of latitude you could fit on, like about 77 dB could fit onto a tape back in the day. And so they had to compress the signal before it hit the tape. And the tape machine did this itself. So it was an added compressor built in the tape machine. And this has got the same circuitry that you would find in a tape machine. It's just not sending it to a tape machine. You can send it to an audio interface. But because of that, it's not a loudness thing. It's about compressing it down to fit onto a tape and to have that same dynamics. And when you compressed it down, it only compressed the peaks. It didn't compress the mids or the lows, not the frequencies, I mean amplitude. And by compressing the peaks, it would change the harmonic information at the peaks. So that's all it's doing. It's only changing harmonic information. It's not necessarily making everything sound as loud as possible all the time. So it's not a loudness machine.
Next question.
And it's for me. I'm asking the question, Nigel, can you describe the diffuser you have on the wall behind you?
Nigel?
Yes, it's made by a company called Artnovian. It's their Lagos diffuser. It's probably in the wrong place. It probably should be in front of me or to the right of me or to the left of me. But it looks so pretty. But that's the point exactly. It's hard to sell something people can't see. It's actually 4 different panels. I think you can really only see 2 of them, but it's 2 by 2, and they are all different size slots. And it's this one's particularly good for sort of lower quieter music and voice. And you can do them in any arrangement you want. They're quite hard to install. You have to install 4 screws, slat them in and down. So this is not for your average installer, but that's one of the things we sell. And Artnovian, I'll put a link. It has lots of really beautiful diffusers and things like that.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I think there's a difference between diffusion and absorption. And personally, I like a little bit of diffusion because it doesn't absorb the sound so much as spread it out and radiate it. So a room can sound natural with the proper diffusion in it. And I like a little bit of slap just at the right frequency so that you sound like a natural voice instead of an anechoic chamber where it's all sucked up from around you.
I want an anechoic chamber. Go ahead, Courtney.
And because of the vertical stripes, it has a slimming effect on your head.
No, next question.
From Hasma Gajar in Cape Town, South Africa. In medical shows, the HP out on the MixPre is for talent. I hear others in meeting from the stereo out in MixPre, but not talent. I end up as TD joining the meeting with another device to listen to everyone. Fix?
I think that is because you are. Is the talent coming in on channel 3?
No, it's coming under channel 1 on the MixPre 6, and the headphones are then wired to the talent.
Oh, right.
And
okay.
And I don't use the stereo out at all, but I try to do that.
And it hasn't worked because it's a different impedance. It's different. It won't drive the headphones. I think the stereo out. You'll need to have that needs to go out to another device, I believe.
Yeah, it's as a TD, I cannot hear the meeting itself because I'm sitting in another room.
Right.
So I thought of using the headphone and I split it. And when I split it, I only hear the attendees in a meeting, but not the talent. I asked a question mainly to annoy Mickey. So.
And Mickey says that the MixPres can drive the headphones from the stereo out, and it's a routing issue. So, and Mickey, it'd be so much easier for you to describe this if you were on the show. Just the same Tuesdays. I'm just saying. Yeah. So, but it sounds like it's a routing issue to the stereo. But I don't know how to. I don't think I could define that in real time.
He did help me some time ago, and then when you forget, Mickey always tells you, fix it yourself. You know how to do it.
There you go. Yeah, it sounds like a routing issue though. So it's. I mean, I will say that I would probably go to a larger mixer or another mixer where I could get the biggest failing of this USB, the MixPre 6, is that there's no XLR out. There's no balanced out of it. Even just 1 or 2 outputs of that would make a huge difference, which I don't think you get to until you get to the MixPre 10. And then having those means that you could just do a long route out of it into something else that you could preview somewhere else. And so I think that if you're doing this as a basic setup, I think the MixPre 6 is amazing. If I was going to do this all the time and really build a system, I would build something that had balanced outputs, that are routable, that can be part of a system. I don't think I would keep on doing as you grow your projects, which you are. I would be looking at a more beefy system to do that, and that might be a MixPre 10. It also may be an X32. At some point, you're going to grow into, I just want to put an X32 in there and call it a day. So that's the other thing to think about there. Mitchell?
Yeah, it might also be the 833, which is a beefier version of the MixPre series, and it does have XLRs or at least TA3s.
It's just a lot more expensive. I don't know what the 8 series is, but it's $5,000. I mean, you get an X32 with the Dante card for $1,800. Yeah, so I think that'd probably be more effective. You'd have a lot more routing. You may not have quite the same things, but you're not trying to go portable. The big thing is that these are great when we're moving them around. We're putting them in bags. We're taking them somewhere for the mix. That's what they're designed for. And we've used it as interfaces for a lot of things. But I've noticed that, obviously the X32 gives you a lot more freedom to do a lot more things. And as you kind of build up, I think you may want to consider that. Next question.
From Douglas Carmichael. Could the concept of hospital radio, and he has a link to it, which became popular in 1925 in the UK, work in North America? Music rights could be an issue, but I could see a project of this type as a positive project for office hours.
Good, Courtney.
Yeah, for the Beverly Hills rock and roll crowd, it could play nothing but death metal rather than all the cheery music, which is normally played on the hospital channel. So.
Yeah, go ahead, Nigel.
So I used to work for the hospital radio in Lincoln, England. So briefly, I can tell you that the demo role you had to do to get on was a program about Jim Reeves, which I'm sure nobody would remember who Jim Reeves was anymore. But you had a lot of music to choose from, and it was great. But it wasn't wireless; it was wired into the hospital, and it was particularly done in government-run hospitals, so that makes a difference. I think it didn't pay performing rights. I think they were excluded from that, or they were licensed in some way that it really didn't impact. It was all volunteers, so that was another issue you have to think about. But it generally kept people happy in the hospital, particularly in England where there wasn't a choice of radio. I could tell you there was a set of records you were not allowed to play. The only one I remember was The Cutting Crews Died in Your Arms Tonight.
That's funny. That was really on the list. There was a list of
There was a list of songs you weren't allowed to play.
No Ozzy Osbourne, no more tears. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Douglas, hospital radio is alive and well in the U.S. and being used by quite a few hospitals. Right around the corner from here is the famous A.I. DuPont Children's Hospital, and they have the Ryan Seacrest program. He has a nonprofit organization that provides exactly that, hospital radio, in this case for kids. They play uplifting and appropriate music, and they also invite some of the residents to come in and do a radio show. So it is being done. It does seem to favor hospitals. I have a business that does retail radio for background music, but this hospital radio is much more interactive and much more informative and keeps the kids happy and involved.
Yeah, and a lot of it's closed circuit is what I think they tend to call it, and universities have that too. A university that I went to for a brief period of time had a closed circuit radio, and of course I was on in the radio team there, and it was it's small. The big problem with any kind of streaming is that the streaming rights and the streaming costs are impossible. Like they're just impossibly bad. It's a horrible business to be in. Streaming, streaming live video, live audio, and paying for the rights is you can't make any money at it. That's why. You can do it if you're a radio station because the radio station has a different dispensation. So radio stations are streaming their own shows out, and there's a different math for that. But if you're only a radio, if your internet radio got killed by the record industry, in what they did, and they probably could have been making some money, but they chose one. They wanted to make a lot of money, or I think probably they wanted to kill it, which is what they did. Go ahead, Mitchell.
You're exactly right. Streaming is a kerfuffle as far as getting licensing right, because there's two licenses. There's a performance license that you pay out to BMI, ASCAP, CSAC, and a few others. And then there's the recording mechanical rights, and that's the owner of the songs.
But even beyond that, I mean, just the stream, the way that they've identified streaming specifically, and the way that they charge for it is, abhorrent. Like
I call it the country club fee because it is designed to discourage anybody from streaming audio, especially what Sound Exchange does via the record companies, the owners. And here's the thing that really irks me about it all is that there aren't any U.S.-based record companies. These are all foreign companies that, from the USA's point of view, they're imposing these restrictions. So the record companies don't want you to do streaming. So like Alex says, they make it complicated and draconian as far as doing all the reporting and the separations of the songs. It's very hard to get.
Yeah, I mean, the record company was... I can tell you, somebody who used to work for a record company. They weren't made up of the scholars in high school. Just in case you're wondering, like they're not if you came out with a pretty good head on your shoulder, you could move through the record industry like a hot knife through butter because there just wasn't a lot of competition, and they just don't think through that stuff very well. They think in old formats and old processes, and the streaming thing could have been a lot more successful for them because it didn't make any money when there wasn't anybody, it didn't make any money when no one was listening to it. But as it gets bigger, it's getting to be a big check for them. And it could have been that big check a decade ago. Like it could have been a big check a long time ago. But instead, they did all this stupid somersault that they do, to make that work. When I bought the Police, Outlandos D'Amore, I paid for it once. I didn't, they didn't get paid every single time I listened to, Roxanne or whatever, like they, or that whole album, which I listened to until I almost wore it out. And so the thing is that they're now getting paid every time you play a song. And sure, it's a small amount of money per play, but it's still per play. It's an amazing business model, Anyway, and as it gets bigger where everybody's doing it and it becomes ubiquitous, it's going to make a lot of money for them. But it could have done that a long time ago. Napster told them it could have done that. They were like, this is what we think we should do with it 20 years ago. And they instead, killed off, literally cut the hand off that wanted to hand them cash. So it's amazing. It's just an amazing process. But it built Apple. So we can all be happy that our iPhones are paid for by the music business's stupidity. Next question.
From Hasmut Kajar in Cape Town, South Africa. For now, almost completed with the upgrade to Dolby ATMOS 11.2 setup with 2 subwoofers. How should the speakers be located relative to my ears, and what about the 2 subwoofers?
Where's the 4? 11.2.4.
There's four Atmos speakers.
Above you?
Above me, yeah.
So that's 2.4. That's 11.2.4.
Yeah. I've got 11 speakers, 2 subwoofers, and 4 Atmos speakers.
So it's 11 speakers. So it's really, is it a 714? Is it a 714? Would you define that as a 714?
Well, it's
724. 724.
Yeah.
So it's a 724. Okay, got it. Okay.
Yeah, sorry, 7.24.
Right.
It's a 11.2 system that can support up to 11 speakers. Yeah,
it's great. Go ahead, Nigel.
So I think it depends on what you want to listen to. Some of the best home theaters I've been in, I was in one about a month ago, very pleasant $150,000 one, 2 huge subwoofers, which were actually in the back wall, projecting the sound forward. Some people like them sort of either side of the seats. Some people put them in the front. It largely depends, I've seen, on the aesthetics of where you can actually physically put them. If you have no choice, then you move them around till you like the sound in the room.
Go ahead, Carl.
So I'll put up the graph. You can pause this later, Hasmuk, when you watch it back. So this is pretty much where you want to start. It doesn't mean you don't have to follow this exactly because your room will be different, but you want to try to get close to this for a 7.2.4. Now this is only showing 7.1.4. You want to make sure that your subwoofers, it doesn't really matter where you put them. You just want to make sure they're exactly the same distance from the listening position because they need to be in phase. The subwoofers will be the first thing that goes out of phase. So as long as the front surface of your subwoofer is the same distance from you, regardless of where they are. So you can have one in one corner, one in the other corner, but as long as they're at the same level, that's fine because they won't go out of phase. If they are out of phase, there's usually a phase knob on the back, which you can put them back into phase if that's the case. But this is a good starting position. If you've got 4 speakers above, that means you're not going to have any directly above you. That's in a 6 system. So if you have 6 above you, you'll have 2 directly above. So the 4 that are above, this is kind of the ones where it actually makes more sense. They need to be equally in front of you as they are behind you. These are the ones that are in the ceiling. The ones that are around the back, so these are like the surround speakers. Usually it's 90 to 110, but 90 is better for Atmos. And then your rear speakers, which are the ones at the back there that are at like head level, they generally don't get them too close. If you get them too close to each other, some people put them on like the same bookshelf. They just put them like a meter apart or 3 feet apart. Try not to do that. Try to follow the angles here. But this is just a basic one. Now the angles will be more severe at the back as they are at the front. At the front, the speakers are relatively closer together. So you can, if you've got like an 85 centimeter TV, an 85 inch TV, then your left and right speakers will be probably close to the edges of your TV, and the center speaker will be generally under it. If you're in a TV setup, of course. But yeah, the angles at the back will be more severe than the angles at the front. So you don't have to make your left and right at the front so wide. Your subs, as I said, your subs can go wherever you feel comfortable with them. They're not omnipresent. That's not how subs work. They are omnidirectional from their point source, but it's more about making sure that both the subs are the same distance from you.
Go ahead, Bill.
What Carl said, and I'm a little concerned with the 2 subs, particularly if you're going to have a lot of people. If there's just a very small listening area in the center, that'll be just fine. But boy, you get low phase issues on wavelengths that long. If somebody's sitting to one side significantly, there can almost be a delay that between the 2, and that's going to move that low bass out of phase, and just be careful about that. Even in the commercial theaters, they're almost always single point source subwoofers. I don't remember seeing a whole lot of commercial theaters that use multiple speakers for the low end just because of those phase problems.
You go ahead, Hosman.
Yeah, I got 2 subwoofers because I've got to. I didn't purchase them. I've been listening to more the music in Dolby ATMOS, and I listened to David Bowie's ATMOS version of Ziggy Stardust. And I find that I get much more pleasure out of the ATMOS music than I get from the movies. But I'm still moving the speakers around, and I found that if I keep them at ear level, I have a better experience than if the speakers are high up. So I'll take a polycam of the room, and I'll try and share it somewhere in after hours and show you the entire configuration.
No, absolutely. The configuration I've seen the most often for a 724 or a 2 with 2 subwoofers in whatever configuration is usually the subwoofers have been on either side basically halfway between the center speakers and the right and left speaker. That's usually, like each one of them subdivides that right, on either side there. That's the way I've seen it. I'm not recommending it, but that's the way I've seen it in some pretty places that know a lot about us around. Anyway, go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, when you take that picture, make sure we see whether it's a flat floor or a raked floor, because if you have raking and you have tiered seating in your cinema, that will change the placement, which is why everyone's saying at the end of the day, you've got to move them around till it sounds right.
And the house that when I bought my house, it had a 712 in it, and what they had chosen to do, which I haven't undone, is they actually, because there's no up speakers, there's the no raised speakers, they put them a little higher so that you get that kind of feeling of things above you, and it actually worked out pretty well. Eventually I'll redesign it, but the geometry of the house is so complicated that it would take me a lot to fix it. So I've chosen not to just yet. Go ahead, Osman.
So this issue about 11.2 versus 7.2. So if I include the Atmos speakers that are in a ceiling, and plus all the other speakers, that makes up 11 speakers, then plus 2 subwoofers. So is it still 7.2?
We would typically call that we would typically call that 724. Okay. The speakers that are in the ceiling are considered, because usually in those 3, it's how many around, how many above, how many around the sub and how many above. So like a 916 would be 9 around, 6 above, 1 sub, or 916 would be 1 sub, 9 around, 1 subwoofer, 6 above. So that's usually the way that nomenclature works. So you wouldn't normally say 11.2, you'd say a 724. It's normally how you define that.
So my system is 724. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. Nigel?
Yeah, if you look on the receivers, you'll see the third number is often not given. So if you can find an 11.2, it won't say 724. But it won't give that third number on most receivers.
Yeah, so normally I guess the Dolby nomenclature would be the 71, 724 or whatever. But yeah, the receiver just tells you how many outputs it has. Yeah. How does the receiver then let you? Like I haven't had to set up a receiver for a while. So
you're right. So the receiver will say powered channels versus sub channels. They don't care what you're using it for. Atmos is just one of the formats a receiver will do. Atmos's format is 724 or 714.
Right.
The receiver itself just probably has 7 or 11 channels of parity power, which you can put them into zones, of course. So you can do a 7.1 bracket 2.2. So you can have zone A, zone B, zone C. So because they can allow you to set them up into zones rather than using multi-room. So they don't usually do that on the amp itself. It's more the Atmos format is 7.14 or 7.24. The amp itself will be like 11.0 technically, or 11.1 because you can have zone B and zone C, of course.
That makes sense. Next question.
Mike Beardmore at Reading, UK asked, how did the panel's photo video capturing of July 4th fireworks go last night?
Did you capture any, Mitchell?
I am sorry to say that I had planned on it, and then the activities in Illinois made me think twice about going into a crowd with fireworks. So I did not do it. I would like to be able to do it, but I'm intrigued with all the settings that Carl was talking about earlier to try some of this stuff out and see how good it would be.
Now you're going to have to wait at least 6 months until New Year's.
Next big fireworks display.
There you go. Next question.
Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana. He has a link there, and then it's referring to HTML seems like a good fit for 3D scanning. Thoughts?
Go ahead, Courtney.
I don't understand this rig because it would seem to me that the camera and the background rotate around the object rather than putting the object on a rotating turntable. So the only difference that would be, since the relationship of the camera to the background is going to be the same as you rotate around, it would be the same as putting the object on just a little Lazy Susan and rotating it and leaving your camera in the background static. So you have to have a lot more room to use this rig than you do using, a static camera and a static background with a rotating table. So the only difference would be that the lighting changes, unless the lighting is attached to the turntable as well. You would have a fixed set of lighting, so it would be lit from the front when you're shooting it from the back, etc. With this kind of rig where the background and the camera rotate around the object, but the lighting stays still. That's the only thing I can see if you want to have a certain type of lighting. If you're just trying to shoot something to get 3D image out of it to digitize it, then you probably want even lighting all the way around.
Yeah, I do think that the reason you'd want to move the rig, and the reason we've moved the rigs around it, are the rigs that we use are a little more complicated than this, but they're similar in that there's a platform and then there is a rotating. Now, the ones that I've used have 5 cameras that go up and around in a semicircle, and then we rotate it usually at either 15 or 30 degree increments, and we just go boom, 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 boom around. And the reason we do that specifically is because the light remains stable. So that however we lit the object, you want to make it as even as you can, but if you're turning the object, it's very hard to keep it unless it's really diffuse. It's really actually very difficult to keep the lighting perfectly the same. And then you end up with some odd little issues with some of the textures and so on and so forth. So it can be easier to get that. Now, you do want to make it as diffuse as you can, because if it's a 3D object, you want to rotate it around and so on and so forth. But that's the issue. The reason you go around the object is to maintain the lighting. That rig feels like it would be, looking at it, feels like it would not be structured enough. I'd be really worried about it vibrating, changing slightly, doing a lot of other things. Now, with photogrammetry, that might not matter because it'll just kind of correct for it anyway, because it's just going to match up images. So if it's a little off, it should be okay. But I think that it's maintaining the lighting. I would love that board to be larger and further away from the platform. That would make me feel a little better.
Yeah, I was going to say, wouldn't that cause a shadow on the object as it goes through the light as you rotate it around? If the object's
too big, you're going to have ambient occlusion there. So you're going to end up with the penumbra of the penumbra. that is, but you're going to end up with
penumbra right here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So you would have some shadow coming back over that. And so I would definitely want that board to be larger, but further away from the object to make sure that ambient occlusion doesn't occur. So that would be, I think it's a good idea. I see where they're going. I don't think I would buy that. I think for $200, you're going to end up spending a lot more money on time. If you have the time, then but I think that you'll end up being frustrated. Next question.
Chris Widener, Lafayette, Indiana. Small camera anti-vibration, sub 5 pounds. What would your go-to be? It's just not heavy enough for a killshock.
Anti-vibration. I mean, that feels like a Ronin, like that. I mean, or a RS2 or 3. I mean, they should be pretty. I mean, I think that they'll handle vibration pretty well. I mean, that's been typically what works there. Go ahead, Carl.
So if you're comparing it to the killshock, this is generally what you'd be looking at. So the Pro-Am is a pretty good one for about a quarter of the price as a killshock. So this is a more mechanical, what you put on a dashboard of a car or on the front of a car if you're doing that kind of stuff. Whereas this gets rid of all vibration from memory. So this gets rid of vibration rather than stabilization. This you may add a stabilizer to this, but this is more of a vibration killer rather than a stabilization, because this is one that's it's equal. It can handle up to 12 pounds. So it's priced accordingly, where the killshock is around $1,500 US, I believe. Killshock is pretty good, but it is a bit overkill if you're only looking at 5 pound, like a DSLR size camera, or like a pocket cinema camera. I think this is better suited to the pocket cinema cameras. And as you can see, its mounting plate is humongous. You can have magnetic lamps, and you can mount this in a million ways.
There you go. Next question.
Josh Kaufman from Pittsburgh, PA asked, what are the best uses for audio compression? What are the most abused usages for compression?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I love those questions. They're great. First of all, a compressor is basically a device that makes low sounds higher and high sounds lower based on a preset threshold and compression ratio. So to suggest what are the best uses, works great on voice because you want to have it there to keep it from getting too loud when you get excited. And when you're low, it brings it up so you can hear what's being said. For me, 3 dB is about as much compression as I want to hear, whether you're using a compressor or a limiter, because anything more than that starts to sound artificial. And Mickey, I think, would say that I'm just on the edge of being artificial here, so that's me. But to answer the second part of your question, the most abused usages for compression, radio stations.
Yeah, go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, so radio stations and the loudness wars, which happened probably for the last 15 years. They've ended now, thank God. But the other thing that compression is in live is actually, you'll find in live, you'll actually have compression used in, let's say a band has, they do rock songs and they do ballads. You'd have very different compression, and they actually have the board set up for these two types of songs. So if they're doing a ballad, they actually don't want heavily compressed stuff because it's more of maybe the acoustic set, that kind of stuff where they come out front just an acoustic. But when they're doing their rock songs, maybe their first song they're starting up in their concert with, they're going to be loud. Everyone's going to be loud. So they need to compress so the singer and the drummer are in the same range. So you can hear the drums and you hear the singer. In a ballad, you don't necessarily want that. You want the singer to come through a lot more. So they'll have different compressions for different instrument groups, and it is groups. So the drums isn't just one instrument, it's actually like 8 instruments, because cymbals are very different to like a bass drum. So you have to compress them differently. So drums and acoustic drums are like number one for compression as far as rock music is concerned. And then the other one is, as Mitchell said, broadcast. So we need to compress to go out to the speakers that people are listening on. So back in the 80s, I was on little TV speakers, and now it's laptop speakers. So we now compress in the mastering phase or the output stage for broadcast, because we need to make sure that what we're playing sounds good on all these different types of speakers. So pop music is heavily compressed because it sounds good on a phone, whereas classical music won't sound as good on a phone because you'll lose all the transients of those dynamics because they don't usually compress classical music too much.
And go ahead, Bill.
All of those things, plus I think the best use, obviously, was keeping your radio station on the air, because the FCC has very strict limits, at least in America, about your radiated power. If you didn't compress a signal beforehand, you could easily radiate too much power, get a ticket things, and they take you off the air. So literally, it became part of radio because you didn't want the regulators on your tail end.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, what Bill said, if you're on AM, it would get your signal out too far, you would be exceeding your maximum radiated power level. And if you're on FM, you'd be jumping into other people's frequencies, because frequency modulation, the louder the sound is, the further off frequency it goes. So you have to have, it's required by the FCC to have compression in there to keep you within the legal tolerances of broadcast.
Yeah, let's go to the next question.
Next question from Dennis Champion Walker in Mansfield, UK. Is there an automated way for us to process show graphics to be good in HDR?
Yeah, there is. It'll be an FS2, or not an FS2, an FS-HDR. We're waiting for them to arrive. So typically we'll take SDR graphics. The first thing that we'll do is take SDR graphics and pump them to. So we're going to build an SDR show, and then that'll go out and that'll stay normal. In the background, we're going to be testing going to an HDR show. And what an HDR show means is that we run the whole show in HDR, and then we tone map it back to SDR. That's not going to happen immediately because it's going to take a lot of work on our end to do. So we want to maintain the quality of the show ongoingly. Now, I actually think that an HDR show tone mapped to SDR will actually look better than a regular SDR show. But it's going to take us a little time. So we're waiting for some FS HDRs to arrive. When they do, we'll start being able to color correct each individual person from their Zoom ISO, and then be able to fix Mitchell's shirt and make it. Anyway, so there we go. Yeah, see, exactly that's exactly what you want, Mitchell. So anyway, so we will first, just as again, we'll run an SDR show and then bump it to HDR. The next step, though, will be to run an HDR show and push it back down to SDR in the same way that we're going to slowly build towards a 5.1 mix for the show. The HDR show will have 5.1 and the SDR show will be stereo. And so we're kind of working towards those, and it'll probably take us the rest of the year.
Hey, Alex, when we get there, can we have it a Hawaiian shirt Friday?
Yeah, absolutely.
That'd be awesome, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that'd be great. I don't have any Hawaiian shirts anymore, but I could try to find one. All right, next question.
Next question in from Robbie Clark Snooks in Chilliwack. He wants to know, are there any plans for sports production second hour? After using TriCaster since 2005 and integrating vmix in 2018, I'm curious how Blackmagic users deal with replay and scorebug, etc., which are very easy with other applications.
Yeah, we should. Yeah, let's talk to some folks about. I don't know how many people. I think a lot of people that do sports end up using actually TriCasters and vmix, specifically because those graphics tend to be outboard at that point. I think you have more control when you use a secondary system to do it. But I think that a discussion about sports graphics would make a lot of sense. Go ahead, John.
So this is exactly what Doug Ferguson, who's often on the panel, uses. He just upgraded his TriCaster. He was using TriCaster, but he also has their replay. What's it called? I can't remember.
3Play.
3Play's pretty decent product. It's expensive, but he's upgraded to ROS, and then he uses CharacterWorks for the real-time graphics.
There you go. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, what is the box on the table in this opening shot from Office Hours Space? It looks like a Studio Technologies product.
Go ahead, John.
I looked at this scene. So Noah set up all the cameras. It could be one of those. We had a 10 by 10. Thank Nigel. Nigel had to run over to Costco to buy us 2 Easy Ups. And one of the easy ups was a 3-camera studio, and it looks like that's where they're shooting from. And we had the camera set up there, and we had comms. And so the guys were all on headset comms. So probably is one of those. But Noah and Greg Ballot was our A1. So one of those two guys would know the answer.
Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
It's definitely a Studio Technologies because of it. You can see from its profile, except the one in the picture has 3 buttons on it. So it's probably the 206.
Right. Yeah, and there's a lot of them. There's a lot of Studio Technologies, but they all look kind of the same, just with more buttons or less buttons or analog or digital or, all those things. Next question.
Hasmut Kajar in Cape Town, South Africa. On my StreamDeck, I ended on page 89 with no page up, number, down page numbers, and just could not get to page 1, where I have companion buttons and page nav. How does everyone manage and avoid this trap?
You have 89. How did you get to page 89?
So on my StreamDeck, I have a folder button. So I use the StreamDeck, and that folder button goes into a folder. And then from that folder onwards, I map all the companion to it dynamically. And that can go from 1 to 99.
Right.
And I ended up on 89, which didn't have the navigation buttons, page up or down.
Right.
And I just couldn't get out of it. So, and I don't know how I ended up on page 89. So Dennis helped me out yesterday in after hours. So what I had to do was to map the page numbers to those blank buttons and navigate my way back to 99, then up, and I ended up on page 1 again.
That's a funny problem. So I was like, that's a lot of pages for a StreamDeck. Yeah, that's good. Do you use, how many pages do you normally use?
Yeah, I use only 3 or 4, but it's based on companion. So companion has pages 1 to 99. Right. So it just creates those pages 1 to 99 on the StreamDeck.
Yeah. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, you just want a back button so you can hit it 89 times, or a reset that takes it right back to page 1.
There you go. Yeah. Next question.
Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, PA. What are the best reasons for a Chromecast to take up an input on my ATEM?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I would, either a Chromecast or a Fire Stick or an Apple TV. The Chromecast just allows you to broadcast from a wireless device or another device through it. There it is. That's the device. It's just a way of getting stuff from your phone into the ATEM. Just another way to do it.
And sorry, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, exactly. If you want to demonstrate something like a phone app or something, that way you can put your phone screen into the switcher and demonstrate it to people in a vertical format. I have one that, that I can cut to my TiVo. I won't leave it up there more than a second, so that if I want to play something back off my TiVo and do slow-mo or analyze something, I can bring it up into the ATEM easily as another input.
Next question.
And it's from Douglas Carmichael. The Roland Fantom-06 and other Roland instruments built on the ZEN-Core engine have a limiter or compressor available in the master bus. With either of them, before the analog heat, help me reach a -12 or -8 LUFS target.
Go ahead, Carl.
So it depends so with -12, -8, what you're talking about there is depending on what you're going into. So if you're going into like an audio interface, you can just turn up the gain or what's called the trim for line level on your audio interface, and you'll distort. You'll hit 0 dB, which is clipping. So you should be able to clip very easily with this. It's not that hard. If you turn the synth output up full blast, it shouldn't in theory clip on the way out though, unless you're adding distortion to the effects part. But you should be able to clip on your audio interface as far as levels, or you can actually do it in the computer itself, of course. So 0 dB is where we're talking for digital. When we're talking with analog equipment, we're usually talking -24. This is called headroom. So you can actually set the headroom for your analog equipment, which would be -24, which is, it sounds like you're trying to go above your headroom. So if you on the back of your equipment, you see something that says like -18, -20, -24, that's headroom, and that's the analog headroom of your preamp, not the clipping. Clipping would be essentially 0 dB in the digital world. So just keep an eye on your trim level, which is essentially your gain on your audio interface, and just make sure you're not you're not clipping in your whatever your DAW you're recording into. You should be fine. When you go to the mastering stage, when you export that file from your DAW, you can go through a mastering engine and you can do compression there. That's where you want to make your loudness wars. You play that when you're outputting from your DAW. That's where you're going to do your loudness wars. You will not do it with an instrument itself.
And next question.
Mike Beardmore, Reading, UK, with a question. I hear that there are new animations in KeyNote after recent update. How might they make presentation creation easier or better?
Go ahead, Carl.
So yeah, I've been looking at the new update. I'm not using much of the new animations. There's just a few like a kind of combination, like what's built in. So it's like instead of it just sliding in, it can now slide and spin. So it's kind of adding like two, but they just put them into one kind of click rather than adding two. I'm currently building a little slide deck for synthesizers that we'll do later on in office hours. But mine is less creative and more functional as far as any of these transitions I'm doing. But I've looked at them. They're a little bit like, not gimmicky, but they've essentially just added a couple together and fade through a color rather than just fade through black. So there's a few little ones that are in there, but they're just kind of basic ones. So you want to play around with them, but a lot of them are gimmicky. Some of them I'm using more for practical reasons, not for like introducing, like I only use dissolve essentially if I'm going to bring something in. But there are other things I'm doing. It's more of like a build. It's like an actual build, more like a small version of motion. So the way you would use motion, I'm kind of doing that in KeyNote rather than going out to motion and bring it back in. But play with them. Just take a look at all the transitions in there. You got build in, build out, and you got actions. Actions are very different to the build in and build outs. But there are some in there. There are some interesting ones in there. The fade through color is interesting, especially if you have like a black background. You can fade through a color. It's quite nice, but they're more for creative effect.
Hey, go ahead. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Do they provide the capability of creating your own backgrounds and importing them back into Motion or into KeyNote? Excuse me.
Yeah. So I do that myself, but I do it very convoluted. So you'll notice my slide. So if I bring up a slide now, let's bring up a slide. And I bring up a slide. You'll notice that my background changes color. Now, the reason I do this has to do more with Zoom. So if you watch subtly, it'll change colors. Because if I send Zoom a static image, it goes down to like 1 frame a second. If it changes color, it sets at 30 frames a second. So by changing color very subtly, Zoom will keep this at 30 or whatever in frames a second. If I keep it static, it'll go down to about 5 frames a second, maybe 10 frames a second if I'm lucky. That's if you're a webcam. If you're doing screen share and you do enhanced video, it definitely goes down to 1 frame a second if you've got a still image. So that's the reason why I do a dynamic background. I did this dynamic background before they added it into KeyNote. And this is a dynamic background, but I had to custom create this one myself.
Yeah, I'm just looking at it, trying to figure out whether you could. I got a little distracted because I was trying to figure out how to edit it. It doesn't look like
fixed.
It doesn't look like you can, at least without hacking into the data. It doesn't look like there's a way to do this. I can only imagine that there will be eventually. The cool thing about the dynamic, so they didn't change the animations that much. What they did is they added dynamic backgrounds, and the dynamic backgrounds are slowly moving. And the cool thing about it is you could do this before. You could have a moving background, but it would reset or it would change as you go from slide to slide to slide to slide to slide. With the dynamic backgrounds that Apple's added, you can have a slow moving thing happening, and it literally will just keep happening as you go from slide to slide to slide. That dynamic background will continue to just keep on playing forward, and you won't see any hitches. So that's the real advantage if you're doing something on site. I would almost never recommend doing this if you're doing something over Zoom or over a live stream. Slow moving content, especially if it's complicated, puts a lot of stress on your compressor. And so, you're moving all the pixels. So the thing to always remember about real-time compression, especially, is that you have a budget of a certain amount of megs per second. So at 1080p, we have a budget of I think about 6.2 megs per second for Zoom. When you run out of that budget, you just end up with a bad picture. So the source of 1920 by 1080 could be thought of as well over a gig of data that could potentially be sent to you. What we're doing to get it down to that 6.2 is throwing away a lot of data, or that's what Zoom's doing as it does it. It goes from a gig to six megs a second. The first thing it does is it does temporal compression, which means that it's going to look at every frame, and it's going to start. You have keyframes that are 30 or 60 frames apart, and then it's going to start doing either P or B frames that are basically looking at the frames around it and making decisions about, I can throw this away because it's going to be the same through all these pixels. This pixel is going to stay the same all the way through the next 60 frames, and so I can just say this is for the next 60 frames. I don't have to calculate it. So by doing that, it saves a lot of data. Then spatial compression comes in and finishes the job. Whatever temporal compression couldn't do, spatial compression does by grouping the colors together to each other. If the temporal compression can't do any of its job, when you're moving those frames, when you're moving them, the temporal compression can't do anything. It just goes, I don't know, hands it over to spatial, and spatial beats the bejeebers out of it. So because it's like you have to get into this hole. So it just pounds it out. So it's really important to not have, if you have the worst thing is complex things moving slowly, because the other thing is they'll start to tear, they'll start to do all kinds of other things. So the dynamic frames are really cool if you're going to be in the room. If you're going to do it over Zoom, don't do that. Go ahead, Carl.
So yeah, the only thing is Zoom is it won't keep a constant frame rate. I believe I understand exactly what you're saying. If you're staying at 30 frames a second,
and then what it'll do is it'll just throw frames away. If it gets too bad, it'll just start throwing. You'll start losing frames.
But the problem is, I noticed when I put up my static slides in the past, my frame rate goes down to 5 frames a second. Yeah. And the problem. The only problem there is if I'm doing a presentation. So when I'm here, and obviously that's not a problem because I'm only showing one slide at a time. But if I'm doing a presentation where I have a transition and I want a transition to be, do a transition between like a magic move, right? You can't do a magic move on Zoom if you go from a static image to a static image, because the magic move will happen in about 2 frames. Just go, that's your magic move. Because Zoom will put you down to 1 frame a second if you spent 10 seconds or 15 seconds on a static image and you do a magic move to another static image. It won't show you the magic move because Zoom will keep you at 1 frame a second.
Because it can't transition that quickly. And the main thing is that it is a Zoom's trying to do you a favor. It's trying to get higher resolution at a lower frame rate.
What I'm trying to do is maintain my magic moves. So by keeping a slightly dynamic background, Zoom will always give me 30 frames a second. So when I do my magic move, it'll show at 30 frames a second. Okay. So I'm preserving the magic move. That's all I'm preserving. I'm not caring about anything else. Right. I'm just preserving magic move.
Interesting. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, you just answered the question I was going to ask, but I was going to point out the fact that because your background is a multicolor gradient and it's moving, that is the absolute worst thing for the compression, as Alex said, because the gradient requires lots of interframe compression, and the movement requires a lot of interframe compression. So it's the worst compression artifact you can achieve there is moving gradient colors.
Next question.
Gordon Lake from Los Angeles, California asked, I caught a part of a conversation where Carl said a coat hanger beat out an XLR cable. Please explain.
Go ahead, Carl.
So what it was a Monster RCA cable. So this is, audio. A coat hanger was used in a blind test, and they put it up to scopes. They put everything on it. This person did it. You can find this test on the internet. I think Monster tried to get it taken down, but a lot of publications kept on reprinting this test. So they were showing essentially everything you can measure for an audio signal, going from a source to a receiver, that kind of thing, where you can actually see the signal coming in and what's changing. They found that the coat hanger had less deterioration of that source signal than a Monster cable that cost $1,500. And this is an RCA Monster cable. So essentially it wasn't an XLR, but because of that, Monster kind of got upset, and there was lawyers and stuff about this, but other publications picked up this study and picked up the data that was come off it, and that's why, because this person actually did all the measurements, showed essentially all the resistance in the Monster cable versus the resistance in coat hanger. The coat hanger is not very flexible, but it has very little resistance, so it sends the audio signal pretty pure, but it will bring up interference. And they said it's not a problem if your coat hanger is 1 foot long. If your coat hanger is 30 feet long, yes, problem. But if it's 1 foot long, or essentially the way it works with high-end components, they sit one on top of the other. So your coat hangers are really only 6 inches long. And people said that it was perfect. So this is probably about 10, 12 years ago now, but you'll find it on the internet. It's quite hilarious read from some of the publications that republished it as well.
All I can say is that if you start wiring your components up with coat hangers, no one's going to take you seriously. That's all I'm saying. Like there's a certain level of. Go ahead, Bill.
I was just going to say, if you want to maintain balanced lines, just remember you're going to need 3 coat hangers per connection. So your coat hanger budget's going to go crazy.
I don't think this was I think this was unbalanced. This is just a RCA comparison there. Go ahead, Courtney.
And what do you use for the shield? Chewing gum wrappers or something?
Tinfoil, of course.
That's so funny. All right, next question.
Eric Nathan from Bellingham, Washington. Do you have a favorite EQ plugin? What's the easiest way to EQ yourself?
Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
I have a range of plugins. I like the Waves plugins, and depends on whether it's parametric or a graphic equalizer. But I like the ones that have the adjustable Q, which is the width of the bandwidth that you're adjusting. And the best way to for me to check EQ and adjustment is on my own voice, because I know exactly how I want it to sound. And if I'm talking while I'm listening, I literally can do that, interactive adjustment.
Good, Carl.
So generally, you should only have to EQ if your microphone is deficient. So if your microphone is not flat, or if your mic technique is deficient, where your microphone is too far away or something like that. So mic technique is far better way of approaching this than using EQ. EQ is usually there to solve problems. In live, it's to get rid of feedback and those kind of things, and fix room frequencies and modes in the room and that kind of stuff. That's live. But if you're recording into your, let's say, in our spaces that we're in now for office hours, and we've got relatively quiet spaces, then your mic technique is 99% of it. EQ is only there to fix problems, but you shouldn't have any problems if you're recording in a booth or you're recording in a quiet room. Noise cancellation, that's a whole different thing. I won't get into that. But EQ is not a tool that you would use to make you sound better. It's a tool to fix problems in the room you're in for sound reinforcement. That's generally the main reason it's used. But it can be used creatively in a mix. So if you have two singers, like backing singers, and you have a lead singer, you can EQ them different. What you're doing is you're actually pulling down EQs. You're never going to pump them up. You're going to pull down EQs, maybe your backing singers, so they don't sit on top of your main singer, even though they may be, singing the same frequencies. So essentially that's a timbral choice. You're changing the timbral quality of your backing singers compared to your lead singer. That's a creative use of EQ. But for what we do here for voiceover work, EQ would only be to fix a deficiency of a microphone that's not best suited. A flat microphone is best, of course.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
And following on to that, it's hard to change things if you don't know they're there. So actually audio scopes or scope suites inside of other tools can really help you. I know Channel EQ on Final Cut, and I think a lot of other programs will give you a live view in third octaves of the signal. And sometimes you can visually see things that are deficient, to Carl's point, or see things that are overly pronounced because of standing waves in a room. And that's a good place to start with an EQ that can help you sound more natural or more whatever you want to sound.
Good, Courtney.
And you can use EQ if you're using a windscreen, for example, on a microphone. I know the 416 that Bill is using there is actually a little bit peaky in the 6 to 10,000 range, because it's normally used inside of a windscreen or windsock to some degree, and so they compensate for that somewhat. Also, a lot of lavalier mics that are placed underneath clothing muffles the sound quite a bit. If you put it under clothing, you might have to jack up the EQ to make it sound a little more open and natural there.
Next question.
TJ Asher, Minneapolis, Minnesota. Follow up on the Final Cut versus Compressor export from last week. I did not have 2-pass enabled in Compressor, and it still took nearly 3 hours to output a file sent to Compressor from within Final Cut. Direct to Final Cut export, 10 minutes. What gives?
Go ahead, Carl.
So this has to do with hardware compression versus software compression. So the M1 and actually a lot of even some of the Intel stuff that's been out in the past, they have what's known as hardware encoders, so real-time hardware encoders. So if you pick a particular format that matches the hardware encoders, which is sometimes the Apple device codecs that they call them in Final Cut and in Compressor, those ones are actually hardware encoded and they can be done in real time. What they're actually doing is they're actually taking the hardware encoding that's in the ISP for the camera. So when you record 4K 60 in the camera, it's got to encode that at 4K 60 in real time. So it's actually recording a video in real time. So there is a hardware encoder that's built into the iPhone for certain frequency, well, for certain resolutions, and these are the same resolutions as the camera. The M1 has that same ISP, even though you don't have a camera in your Mac Mini, let's say, it still has that same hardware encoder because it's all just on the die of the M1. So if you happen to match the same resolution that you find that in an iPhone or an iPad camera, it can do real-time hardware encoding. If you pick anything that's outside those specs, it has to do it via software generally. And well, I don't know, 3 hours, depending on what you're doing, maybe ProRes or something. But if you pick a codec that's the same as the camera on an iPhone and an iPad, it'll do it in real time.
Go ahead, Bill.
One other thing about Final Cut is that it has kind of resolution and processor agnostic approach, which is to say, if it has a little computation to do, it will do that as well as it can. But if it has a lot of computation, it will not dumb it down to do its computations. It will keep full range. I ran into that a lot when I was accidentally using large DSLR photos and putting some kind of a filter on them in Final Cut. Suddenly my output time would go way up. Why? Because it was trying to apply whatever filter I'd put to that massive array of pixels, and it would calculate every single thing to a high order precision, even though I didn't need it. And learning to downsize my photos to something that was much smaller would really increase my processing times a ton and give me exactly the same end. I think in terms of sending things off to Compressor, you may in Compressor be targeting something with a much higher raster because you're trying to transcode. I mean, you're sending it off your timeline into Compressor, and whatever your Compressor target is, you could be asking it to do a lot more calculation because of that. So just be aware that the decisions you make to click a button to say, yes, I want this done, can somehow have a tremendously kind of logarithmic impact on the amount of calculations that have to be done behind the scenes, and you have to be careful about that.
Yeah, I'd really like to see what the output is from Final Cut, like what the file format is, and if you're outputting exactly the same file format out of Compressor, because 10 minutes versus 3 hours, there's a lot of things you can do. That's really hard. What you're doing is really hard to get that output. So it's hard to get to have that big of a delta between the two. So I'd be super curious. Maybe you can ask the question again. Or tomorrow, but let us know what you're using, maybe later today, exactly what the target output is, whether it's H.264 or H.265. Is it the same for both of them? Are you absolutely certain? Because it seems like that delta is huge. And again, I never do what you're doing. So you're definitely in an area that I don't know very well, because I will never export directly from Final Cut to Compressor unless there's from Motion to Compressor for some very, I'm looking for TGA frames, is the only time I do that. But outside of that, I will not do that because it's because you want that ProRes file out of the Final Cut, so you don't have to keep on going back into Final Cut. You want an end record that is created at the highest resolution that you can. Then you compress from there, and it's so much simpler. And we learned this over a long time ago, because it's better to get it out of Final Cut and then compress it, rather, in my opinion. So anyway.
Yeah. One other thing, Alex, remember that people used to get freaked out when they would apply Neat Video's noise reduction to something, and it would take it from 2 hours to 2 days. Yeah, and it was because it was working so hard to separate noise from signal.
There's something different in the setting, though. I mean, there's something dramatically different in those settings that's causing that. It's not just Final Cut or Compressor. To your point, I mean, there's something there that's you're asking Compressor to do that's different than Final Cut, because it's not just the processing. Like, if they're both trying to do the same thing, they will not be that far apart. So there's something else that Compressor is being asked to do. It could be the anti-aliasing. It could be the way that you're dealing with. Well, one thing could be frame interpolation. So if your frame interpolation for some reason is set to optical flow as opposed to something else that Final Cut I don't think will do optical flow, on the export. And so you could be getting, something out of that. So it could be, if you're changing frame rates, maybe that could do it. So anyway, it'll be really interesting to see. Might even be a lab or something, because I'm really curious why you would have such a big difference. All right. Starting a little late because we knew that we'd probably get through this pretty quickly. For those of you watching, we were planning to do an HDR test here, but we had some technical issues, and it was 4th of July, and so I sent Kevin home. So anyway, we didn't do that, but we're going to jump into it. We're still going to go ahead and do Ruthless Reviews so that we can kind of keep moving forward with looking our best when we get to that, but it won't be an HDR this week. In a coming week, next week or the week after, we'll do it with HDR. Anyway, so we'll get started. Basically, we're going to look at, in this case, I think we'll probably talk a little bit about audio and video, but framing, color, that type of thing. So I'll kick it off. What do people have to say about my frame?
It looks exactly like you do on Mac Break Weekly.
It's funny how that works when you use the same camera, same setup. Now, I thought I saved this just for fun. I noticed that, I've been working on trying to get less reflection on my forehead, and I have a way to fix it, but I don't use it very often. So one of the things that it's a little less now than it was in the past because I turned off the center light. So I'm on 2 lights that are on either side. But the other thing, I just thought I always want to show people this. This is before. Take a look at my forehead right now. See if this makes any difference.
Yep.
It's kind of cool.
Huge.
That's the when I'm really on something that I'm only on every once in a while. If I'm speaking at an engagement, I'll put that on. That's this Mattify stuff. We use it for interviews and so on and so forth. But it's interesting how it just diffuses the light. I have to admit that I have a thing about adding something every day to my skin that I don't think is a good idea. so especially things of little micro balls, I feel like it's probably not a good idea. So this is made by Mac. This is called Mattify Matte, or I guess it's called Matte by Mac. There's a couple other ones that make it. Mac discontinued it, which made me even more worried about putting it on every day. So I'm still working on doing different things with that to make that happen. Other things that I've done is I've gotten much more specific about using Omniscope and lining up my skin right on that line. I think I let it, I didn't really pay attention to it that much. And if I look back on older ones, I wasn't quite on. Now I'm, when I check Omniscope, my skin color is right on the line in the vector scope, and I think it's more accurate. And so, and then those are the things that I've been doing to kind of keep on adjusting what I'm doing. I stick with again, still cool light behind me, not a lot of changes. I tend to have my shirts tend to be desaturated and usually either slightly. This one's probably the lightest one that I wear, but it's like usually a little bit darker than my face. All of that stuff is just stuff that to have. I think that it makes it easier to pop out a little bit from a color. And I keep everything again. You'll notice that almost everything I wear is cooler and less saturated than I am. That's kind of my approach to that process. I leave the mic in the frame because I want to tell people that I'm using a better mic. Like the reason I do that is to really push people around me to use better mics. So I could put it out. I mean, you can hear it. It's probably okay. It's not as good, but it's still, and I could turn it up, and there's a bunch of things I could do to adjust that. But you can hear the difference in the proximity. And I want to tell people that I'm using a mic because I'm trying to slowly push them to. I think all of us can leave the mics in here because I want to push people to use better mics, because it's good for me. I have to listen to them all the time.
That mic and that position is a great combination for you because it really plays well off your voice. Yeah, no, it works well. With all mics, I tend to put them to one side as opposed to right in front of me so that I don't get pops. And I tend not to get with this one. I don't get the proximity effect here because it's a little bit further away. So, but I can do it. I go, Mitchell. Anyway, so can be used that way if needed. All right. Anyway, that's me. Mitchell, you're next. Let's take a look here. All right. I'm here with my HDR shirt on, so apparently that's not the appropriate shirt to be wearing today. But I would be curious what this shirt would do to HDR. I think we could predict what the effect would be. But I'm pretty much the same as I have been. I've played a little bit with the background content, but I think I'm pretty happy with the way things are showing up. And I heard a rumor that we were possibly going to be framing so our heads were a little smaller. I'd like that because I could get a little more of the console reflection and stuff going on over there. That would be kind of cool.
Well, you can see right now your head's still a little larger than we got the Fenwick frame on right now, and you kind of want to, we want to kind of find that frame over time. Your chin stick, a little lower. People say, well, it's just because I have a larger head. I can tell you that I have a very large head. I mean, physically, I have a big head, emotionally too, probably, but I have a very large head physically, and and I fit into the Fenwick frame, I think. So I think that it's really a function of getting further back or moving your camera around to get to fit into the Fenwick frame.
Zoom back a little bit, and I just use my head the way you use the microphone to assert authority. I've got a big head.
Here's what I will say is that what I found was useful was to look at our show on a big screen. And even now, I would say, like, for instance, HypeMic's head is a little smaller in frame than we are right now. But I think his is probably a better frame for the TV. Like, so when we think about a big TV looking at it, like if we can put the Fenwick frame on HypeMic there, I don't know if we can do that easily. Yeah, so HypeMic's a little smaller. So we may decide to go to a slightly smaller Fenwick frame because I think when we go back, I'll review the show on the TV. But when you look at it on a big TV, I find that HypeMic, I think we're going to find that HypeMic's frame is a little more pleasing. And I noticed that when I was watching the Cinegear coverage, when we went to the panel, I was like, wow, everybody's head's really big. And so I think that it's a little unnaturally big compared to what we're used to in broadcast. So we'll keep playing with that. But otherwise, I think it looks good. I think the on-air, I love the on-air. I feel like it adds a little weight to the one side of your room that you don't have on the other side. I don't like it to be symmetrical, but it's a little bright. I might try to, do you have any ND over it right now?
Yes, it's got one layer of ND 0.6, so I guess it's about 2 stops down, maybe one more.
Try one more layer. See what it looks like. It's a little bright. It's just competing with you a little bit, but otherwise, I think it's a great frame. It's good. It looks great.
Thanks.
Then we'll go to Nigel. Nigel, let's take a look.
Hello. I'm in my regular home office back again. I have a Blackmagic 6K in front of me with a 50mm lens on it, which probably means it needs to go back a bit.
Yep.
There's my Elgato lights all around me, the Art Novium backdrop, Heil PR40 MixPre 3.
And I think that I would. I very rarely see any kind of. I very rarely hear any kind of plosives. I would normally have that mic to one side or the other, as opposed to right in front of you. But I think that it's not something that I notice that much. Yeah, like that's normally what I would do a little bit to that degree.
Does that sound just as good? No different, just without the plosives.
It actually I think it sounds better actually in that area. And I might even move it over just a little bit more and turn it just a little, ever so slightly more. I don't know how much. There you go. What arm are you using there?
I have one of the Elgato low sling ones.
Yep, that's good.
Nigel, what it also does, where it is right now, is it cuts down on mouth noises and things like that, and the implosives. Yeah. So that sounds good.
I think the lighting is good. I think that the your color is good. I think it looks great. It's a great frame. I think we're all getting better. So I think I think it and yours is yours. I know that you tune it often and it looks that way. There's a
yeah. So I took a still frame of what I thought was a good setup. Let me just drop it into the ATEM, and so I can sort of compare myself to see how close. I'm not trying to do the disappear thing. I'm just trying to have the same consistency.
What's the gamma set to in your? What's the gamma set to on your ATEM on your camera?
It's set to 0.
I would love to see what it looked like if you brought it to 0.85.
0.85 positive or negative?
It's positive. I mean, it's down to 0.85 because or maybe I guess it's negative. Is it? Oh, it's 0. Yeah, negative. 0.85 is really low then.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, is that the aperture that you're moving up and down, or is that the gamma?
It's the whole gamma sweep.
Interesting.
I mean, my lift is at 0.07. My gamma's at 0. My gain is at 0.97. I have. Yeah, the contrast at 57 and the saturation at 59. So it's sort of on the Noboscope. It's really actually light changes in the room throughout the day. Obviously, it's still a bit dark. I think if I raise the gamma a little bit.
Yeah, because it wants to. Sometimes when you raise that gamma, what's the gamma set to right now?
0.01.
And then is the what's your aperture set to?
Should be 2.8.
So it's wide open.
Yeah.
Yeah. It feels like you're flattening out your skin just a little bit. Like it's just like there's a little texture there that we're like in the subsurface scattering. There's a little texture like subdermal that I've noticed that with my skin. That's why I've been playing with it a bit.
Trying to smooth the wrinkles out.
Yes, it looks good. It looks good. Yeah, I can't quite put my finger on it. So, but I think that the level of nitpicking that I'm talking about now is astronomical. So
my problem is over here. This is a doorknob.
Right. Which funny is doesn't ever read as a doorknob. Like it just doesn't read that way to me.
It's not a doorknob. It's a door stop.
But until you pointed it out, I don't think I really read it at all. Now I'll think about it all the time.
All the time.
It's a red pill problem. Yeah. So the so anyway, yeah. Okay, good. Looks great.
Just put one on the other side.
Yeah, exactly. You put another one on the other side. Just there's no door there. Just put another stop on the other side. Then you'll have symmetry, and then people will wonder why is there two stops.
I don't want symmetry. I want asymmetry.
Exactly. But there's got to be some. There's symmetry, and then there's weight. Like yeah. But I think it looks fine. I think it's fine. All right, Carl. We're going to jump to Carl here. Always looks good. I think you might have a little I want to say possibly cyan in there. Like it's a little pinkish.
I'm always pink.
I know you are pink, but
it's my complexion.
But yeah.
So the white bookcase. White bookcase will tell you what's what.
Right. But it might be something that I might play with a little bit because your white can stay white, but sometimes it's in the black levels or other things to play with there a little bit. But overall, I think it's always a great frame. Can you talk a little bit more?
So my mic is directly in front. I've got a pop filter here, but I've got it's a side address microphone, similar to yours. Yours is a side address, but yours is a condenser. Mine is a dynamic side address. So that's the only difference.
And sometimes I think that yours is a little thin. Your mic is just a touch thin.
That's because I've got original sound off. You're correct. Because my fans.
Right. Okay.
The original sound off is the best. Like let's do it now so we can hear the comparison. So that's original sound on, but you'll hear the little fans that are in my lights.
Mm-hmm.
It's winter at the moment. I don't have the heater on. It's about 5 degrees at the moment here. So it's about 40 degrees Fahrenheit.
Right.
So it's pretty cold. That's why I wear the vest. I don't usually like wearing something dark. I like to wear, but it's getting pretty cold here. Once it gets about 2 o'clock in the morning, it gets close to zero. we approach it. We don't get below zero too often in Adelaide, but in winter it'll approach zero during office hours. Essentially, get about maybe 2 degrees, maybe about 35 Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
But this is original sound on, so that you'll hear. Yep. So you'll hear that now. Original sound off. I find that original sound off is probably the simplest and most effective way just to get rid of the fan noise without destroying my voice too much. I can do the EQ in the Flow 8, but I find that it's depending on where I am for the mic, it'll actually change it a bit, and it doesn't get rid of all the fan noise, where Zoom does a pretty good job of just getting rid of these fan noises.
Yeah, no, good. Let's jump to Hosmuk. Good afternoon, Hosmuk. I think that for that mic, you're a little far away. For that mic has a lot of off-axis and distance. That PR40. It feels like you're really far away from it, from what I'm used to anyway. A whole hand. Okay. Maybe it's just the angle. I'm just used to seeing it. Maybe I'm just used to seeing it closer to people.
Yeah, probably the angle.
Yeah.
Anyway, I was in front of the wardrobe thinking of a Ruthless review this morning. That's why I put on the clothes I put on.
I think that there is something going on with your saturation and your black levels. So your gain. What is your gain set to right now?
I'm using the ATEM software control. So it's sitting at 2.77 for red, green, blue, and white. That's where it is.
2.7.
77.
Wait, so what's the lift number?
Lift number is 0.01.
Sorry. Try pulling that lift back a little bit. Just see what happens. Like down. Nope, the other way. Okay, and then it looks a little dark. And then grab the overall gamma and push it up a little bit. Yeah, keep going. Yeah, and then just to go a little bit more, just push the gamma up a little bit more. Okay, and then maybe back away just a little bit.
It's on 10.
Yeah, go back a little bit on the gamma.
9. It's 9, 8, 7.
Okay, that's good. That's good. That's it. And then where's your lift now?
Lift is on 0.
Okay, and it was a little higher before, right? Because it looked a little.
Yeah. It was higher.
Yeah, and then, I mean, I think that looks considerably better than it did before. Yeah, so I think that the lift is something that's tricky because if you crush it, obviously you get crushed blacks, but if you raise it up, it looks a little unsaturated, or it has like you just don't see pure blacks anywhere.
Right.
So I think that. And then what's your saturation set to?
Saturation is 39%.
Yeah, try turning it to just right up to 50.
There we go. It's 50.
Yeah, I actually like that better than the desaturated look. So
yeah, that's looking nice. You know what's also nice about it is instead of a splash of color or white light behind him, he's got a little more of that ambient occlusion shadow, which I think is a really nice compliment. Yeah.
I used that for the first time today, light behind me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I still would put some kind of light back there because I don't like contact shadow because it makes me feel like you're right up against the wall.
Right.
Which you might be. but contact shadows tend to, what's the distance from you to the wall?
It's about just less than a meter.
Yeah, because and then your lights are kind of coming at this angle, so that's why you're getting, if they came up a little bit more, that shadow would probably go away. If you're a meter away.
Yeah. I've got 68 Bs in front of me. And
what height are they?
And they way above my head.
Interesting.
So, yeah, but they are tilted to go up to the ceiling rather than on me.
Okay. So it's creating a huge diffuse, which is then affecting that. Yeah, it does look nice and diffuse, like that. You definitely are getting that effect.
Yeah, most of the talent in the medical event had glasses on. So we used to have the lights on them, and we found that it just didn't look right. So then we started tilting the B68s up to the ceiling. Yeah.
But I would be tempted. It's because you have that huge diffuser. You're getting that big ambient occlusion shadow behind you. That I would still think about. I would think about putting a light back there to kind of contradict that a little bit.
Like a blue light behind me. Yeah.
Just because I don't like I just don't like the contact shadow look. I think it can be blue, it can be orange, it can be whatever you want. But I think that it's. I think it would look more pleasing if you didn't feel that.
Dennis Champion Walker points out that it's causing your background to posterize.
Okay.
And any gradient will. So any gradient behind you will look a little posterized, but what will look more posterized is gray, just fading because it doesn't have anywhere to go. So there's no colors that are interacting with each other. So yeah.
Two things I'm doing these days is I don't rely on any of my monitors to see how I look. So I always fire up the meeting in an iPad or an iPhone. So I'm looking at that rather than the monitors in front of me.
Right.
I rely on the omniscopes to set it up, which Nigel took me through. So the RGB parade, I get that right. What I'm finding is I have to set this up every time I fire up. That means go through the ATEM and the scope every time. So even though I save in the ATEM software control, I save the settings. I'm not sure why I have to do like this setting that you've done now. I'm not sure I can preserve it. So that's
right. Yeah, I have to admit that I just almost never turn off my ATEM or my camera. So it's very unusual for me to have to reset it. And when I do, I just find it as an opportunity to do it again, and just keep doing it over. I kind of took Nigel's approach to do it over and over and over again. And instead of being concerned about trying to preserve something, I just get more aggressive about knowing exactly how to do it quickly.
Yeah.
It's kind of like
HypeMiC, did you try going to the file menu in your ATEM software control and just doing a save as? Does it give you a save thing?
Yeah, save as, and then
did you just put it on the desktop or something like that and it's just a little text file?
Yeah. No, nice.
Or try save for startup. There may be a difference.
That's it. The other thing about the head size, I was interviewed a couple of months ago on TV, and I had much larger. Well, the camera was a lot closer, and it looked awful on the TV interview. So, and my daughter said, "Your head is so huge. I mean, it's occupying the entire screen." So ever since then, I pulled back quite a bit.
Yeah, and I think that's where I'm kind of starting to go with the new framing is that your framing looks a little, again, it felt really big when I was watching Cinegear. I felt like our heads looked just massive. Now, the only thing I have about that is that when we look at the interesting thing is that when we for me in the gallery, it's nicer for people's heads to be bigger.
Yeah.
So it's a funny thing. It's like when I'm looking at a gallery view, in some ways I'd rather it be larger. But on a TV, on a big TV, it feels more natural when the heads are just a little bit smaller.
Is our program out gallery view, the custom one we have, that's cropping it a tiny bit anyway. So if I look at myself on Zoom and I look at my bookshelf, then I look at myself in the gallery view that comes up on OH program, it is a tiny bit cropped in.
Yeah, because we're actually putting up.
That is something we could do. So we could actually have a wider Fenwick frame, and then for gallery view, we can actually set it up, as you said, where we can crop in.
Well, but I mean, it's for me as the host.
5%.
But for me as the host, I'd rather see it in Zoom this way. Anyway, so
Zoom, yeah, definitely.
It's a funny thing. There's an interesting request for Zoom to show something slightly different in gallery than it does in full frame. Anyway, so that's a whole other thing. But otherwise, looks good. Looks good, HypeMiC. Let's jump to Danny. Danny. Yeah, overall, I think it looks great. I think that a couple things that I'd probably go after is, now I will tend to almost always recommend against having a high back chair, just because it just competes with your head. So, so I would always prefer, if you can, to have one that doesn't go past your shoulders or very far past your shoulders. I think you'll frame nicer that way. I think that the gray background in focus just shows off a lot of the wrinkles, and so I probably steam that. Hopefully you get to keep it up. I don't know if you take it down or put it up often. Is it something that stays up, or is it something you just put up for the show?
Just leave it right here. Yeah,
all the time.
Just using a shared workspace. So.
Do you leave it up, or do you have to put it up every time?
I just leave it up. It's just on a PVC pipes. I just created a frame because I don't have much space where I'm at.
Yeah.
So I can't put up like a tripod stand or whatnot. It just eat into much space.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, that's great. And so what I would do is, all I would do there is just, if I could, I'd try to steam it, just so that it just get rid of some of the wrinkles, and it should be nice and smooth after that. The steaming works well. And then again, I'd probably, with that mic, I do hear it occasionally plosives on your end, so I probably would move that mic to not so much down, but to the side. It can be as close as you had it in the past, but I'd have it angled so that it's kind of coming to you from one side there. So you're talking, what you want to be doing is talking past the front of the mic as opposed to into the mic, if you can. Yeah, so I'd still probably move it over a little bit more, the mic. So I'd probably,
Let's see.
and then
there. Okay. How do I sound now? Is it less?
Yeah, you probably need to, we don't have the meters in here today, but you probably want to turn it up a little bit. But I'd still, get it. There you go. And then I'd move it over more, and then turn it in. Yeah.
Okay. It's actually on the side because the angle of where my phone is right now, it seems like it's right in front of me.
Got it. Yeah. Okay. That's great. Yeah, I can see that. It's just a little bit to the side there. So, and then figuring that out so that how you feel like you're looking right at the camera. But otherwise, it looks great. It looks great. I try to throw that earpiece. Is it going down the front here?
Oh,
on the other side.
Yeah.
No, it's going behind it. And I have that same problem too. Are you using 2 ears or 1 ear?
2.
So the one thing that I've learned to do after many people complained, because I did this for many, many shows, is you could see my things hanging out all the time. And I learned to twist them. So I just twist them up. I can't do that with the real thin ones. But with the thicker ones that you have and I have, I just twist them up like this, and then I run them like a braid, and then put them in, and then they stay where they belong. So that was the trick that I learned to try to finally.
Use a little wire tie, little piece of a wire tie.
The wire tie works, but I just found that twisting them was fine, and then they stay where they need to be. Great, Danny, good job. Go jump to John.
I am not worthy today. This is my desk.
That's good. It's good. That's the one you normally use. I mean, I think the only challenge you have is the windows behind you, but we've already heard that that's a relationship problem.
I can do it if I get rid of my wife.
Don't do that. I'm sure she's great. So outside of that, I think I do like the little highlight on the audio stuff, and it's there's something I like about it. Just that it's a you feel like you're in something as opposed to just sterile space like I've created for myself. So I like the fact that things are slightly different at times. I think finding a way that you can look more directly into the camera would be great. Sometimes it just looks like you're looking down, because I think you are. I mean, you're looking under the camera. So, but I think when you turn up, the other challenge you have is with reflection on your glasses.
Fenwick's yelling at me, saying the same thing. I'm text message.
Very good. Otherwise, it looks good. Let's jump to Bill. And I always feel like your blacks are crushed just a little bit.
Could be is that I have the contrast up a little bit at 53%.
And what's your black set to? Is it at 0?
Yeah, I think so.
I always feel like it's just crushed a little bit. Maybe is it at 0? Is the lift at 0?
The lift's at negative 0.03.
Yeah, I bring that up to 0.
0.
Yeah, that looks a lot more natural.
Yeah.
I think that's always been the thing, is it always looked a little like every time it comes to you, it feels like it's a little like just the blacks are crushed. We couldn't see your shirt is just on our end, on Zoom's end, always looked a bit like just black, like a black void. I think that actually looks much better, like significantly better than it did a second ago. So
okay, well, good change.
Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah, no, very much more natural. So otherwise, the frame looks great. I like the Mac. I have a Mac. I keep on thinking I got to put it back there. But if
that's an original 128 that a guy named David Baginski gave me 512K of memory in it. But yeah, that was April of '84.
I could definitely see a lot of us ending up with a bunch of Macs in the background, like little like that could be like a little somewhere in the background, because I have a little one for my oops. See, I have a little one for my watch.
Nice.
Your watch charger in here. And
yeah.
Put it in, but that's as big as a Mac I have in the office right now. All right,
they make great aquariums, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's jump to Josh. Let's see here. Josh is our final victim for the day. Let's see. Josh always looks
so good. Currently we can do video first, and then I'm currently not using original sound, but I can try A/B if you like.
Yeah.
My lighting, I have like a flexible key light right above the camera. I have a ring light fill. Both are gridded to save my monitors. In the back, I've got the godoxes for the Carl's recommendation for throwing the color in the back. There's some accent lights in the back that are complementing what I'm wearing currently. Actually, I didn't put my key light. I didn't put my hair light on. No, let me try it. Let me turn it on. So
I think it improves it. The key with the light, with the hair light, is always to have it be pretty subtle. Like it doesn't, doesn't feel like you're working too hard. Which is really easy. What yours does. I mean, it just adds a little bit of detail to it. That's great. And then is that so? That's not a key, or it is a key that's on you right now.
So this, I think I can, if I hit the wrong one. Yeah. So that's my fill that I turned off. So you're seeing my key. If I turn my key off, it's a pain to turn back on.
Yeah. No.
So there's the fill back. So that's the stronger side for the fill, and a little shadow on this side, just for some depth.
So yeah, the one you just turned on is your key.
Yeah.
The one that's hard to turn on.
So that's my key. Yeah. There you go. So it doesn't know.
And then you had
it's the key.
And then and then you said you were going to turn on and off your original sound.
So right now, this is with original sound off, and this is with original sound on. Probably my levels adjusted because I don't have that set up. So you might be hearing more of the audio, but this is original sound on.
Yep. Yeah, we can hear a little bit of the fan. The hard part is that from a purist perspective, obviously with both of them, the voice quality definitely is degraded when we turn original sound off. But yeah, it would be problematic if you're constantly turning that fan on and off. I mean, turning it on and off with the fan. So I think that
I guess you're hearing my heat pump. It's directly behind me. If you're hearing a fan, that's pretty quiet.
It's quiet, but we can definitely hear it.
Yeah,
definitely hear it. And that's the hard part, especially when we start using nice microphones that start to pull it to do that.
So Alex, do you have Josh pinned at the moment? Are you seeing like him at the highest resolution you can?
I had him set that way.
I'm seeing him break up. So you know what I'm talking about, Josh?
Yeah.
I've seen this before. It's usually like Amazon HDMI cables out of like a 4K camera that does that, or it's your sensor overheating. That's the other thing.
It might be the cable. I can try and swap out the cable. There's little like specs that show up.
Yeah, so they're either black or green.
And what camera are you using?
Green. It's the A7 III.
And what are you using to get into the computer?
I'm using a PCI. It's AverMedia capture card, PCI Express.
Yeah, it's real subtle, but so the overall frame looks great, and then occasionally you see little speckles.
Black and green ones. Yeah, so it's either HDMI cable or the card itself.
Yeah,
probably not. The sensor usually doesn't do them like little rectangles like they're coming up. Usually do them as actual individual pixels for the sensor.
Well, the other thing is that my equipment is in just the adjacent room, so all of the cabling goes through. There's 3 conduits that they all go through, and I try to put. Yeah, they're not too long. It's, I think it's a 2-meter cable going from the camera to the capture card and you're
doing 1080 60 out of the camera at 8-bit.
1080 30.
1080 30. So yeah, it's not the data rate that's the problem. But I think it's
4K.
Yeah, I know you can, but yeah, I've seen this problem before with like running long runs of like 4K to an HDMI. Exact same speckling I've seen. It's usually HDMI cable. But it could be the capture card.
What cable? Who makes the cable?
Oh, I couldn't tell you which one it was. The Sonys have the micro HDMI, so they're.
I will say that the Sonys always look very nice. The bokeh on the Sonys is always especially nice on the A7s.
There's some physics involved there. It's a stopped. I think it's a 3 f3 on an 85 mil.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. That's good. Josh always has
85 mil, you can tell, yeah.
Yeah, it looks really nice. It's pretty. So well done. Yeah. I think we have actually a couple questions. We usually don't get to questions because we go through it. Now, John, did you have anything you wanted to add before we jumped into the? I see your.
Yeah, I just wanted to make one comment. Your new blue shirt really looks good because it gives you contrast to your background. I know you always wear your Lindsay patterns, whatever that's called.
I only wear I only wear those on Saturday and Sunday.
The blue one, the new blue shirt.
Oh, you mean that my my work shirt. My work shirt.
Your work shirt. Your new blue shirt looks really, really good on camera.
Oh, thanks. I probably should have taken better care of it. It looks good from here up. There's a chlorine spot on it. So I don't wear it anywhere other than the house now. It's been relegated to the house, and I can't buy anymore because they're sold out. So anyway, yeah. So I'll continue to wear it. It has lots of little lines on it, which is why I don't tend to wear it on the show. But anyway, thank you. All right, next, let's jump to the questions.
Joe Kidd from Bay Area, California. Could you recap the lights, brand, model, lux, color temp, and their configuration for your setup? Thanks very much.
Go ahead, Nigel.
So I have 4 Elgato lights. I think I'd have to look up I always forget which one is which, but these are the key lights and these are the key light airs. I just looked and they're all set to 4700, which is strange because I thought I had them set to 56. So I may have to change those and recolorize.
Go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, so mine are Westcott LEDs, 5600s. They've got little fans in them, which I don't mind so much, but original sound off. So Lux is interesting. So Lux is something I like to talk about generally when it comes to this. So regardless of what camera or sensor you're using, if you can get 2000 lux on your face, essentially, so television was no part of the set could be less than 1000 lux. Doesn't matter if it's a deep background of the set. So just think like breakfast TV kind of stuff. No part of that set could be under 1000 lux, and usually they want the people's faces to be at 2000 lux. A little bit different today because they got big monitors in the background now. But generally, if you're lighting anything and you can get to minimum of 1000 lux in any part of your scene, so you need a light meter. There's no way to do this without light meter. So just a cheap light meter, essentially, a couple $100. Just test every part of your scene that shows up on camera. If every part of that scene has 1000 lux, then you're fine. Regardless, it doesn't matter if you've got the cheapest sensor and a tiny little, 1/3 inch sensor. 2000 lux will make that image look great. What you lose in the 2/3 inch sensor is a little bit of dynamic range because the photo sites are so small. So you don't get you won't get 14 stops. You probably get about 10 stops, to be honest. So lux is kind of really important for what we're doing here, and most of us actually have quite a lot of light. I don't think anyone here I don't see any graininess in the blacks, nearly anyone on the panel at the moment. But lux is a really important thing if you're doing this kind of stuff, especially if you're getting paid by someone to do it. You want to have a light meter. You want to make sure that no part of your set is less than 1000 lux, and you generally want to make sure your talent is at least 2000 lux. And it doesn't matter what camera you have, it will look perfect, even if it's a 1/3 inch sensor or an iPhone or anything, because 2000 lux is more than enough for an iPhone to have no problems. It'd be like an ISO 50, ISO 64, whatever, for the iPhone because it goes quite low. So lux is a really important thing that I think we should talk about maybe one day in a second hour, kind of what it is and how it works. But a lot of us are using like at least 60 to 100 watts of equivalent watts of light hitting us at the moment. So that's why our blacks are not crushed. We don't see any stuff because we're actually getting quite a bit of light. And that's why we have to have original sound off for some of us because we have lights with fans in them.
Yep. Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, I'll do my best. So my key light is a ring light. It's daylight balanced. It's got a grid on it. The fill is one of those fabric lights that sits right above the camera. And it's about between 5 and 6. And I think it's because I've got a lot of monitors. I think that's why I tend to balance it up towards the daylight for mine. And then, of course, the background lights. I have a homemade one. I took a ring light and put a color LED that splashes some thing on the background in the back. And there's this cheap ones on the back for the accent lights. And there's a bar light for my hair light.
You go ahead, Mitchell.
I put my money into my key light, which is right there. It's a light panel Astra Soft, so it's a little bit of a soft light, and it is a bi light so that I can adjust the color a little lower. It's just a tad warm. Over here, I've got a fill light just to catch the other side of my face so I don't look too clamshelly. That's a nan light. and it's running probably 5600. Behind me, I've got another nanolite for hair lighting. And of course, I wasted my money on that, obviously. And hanging to get the lighting color behind me is I got to look. Oh, a LEDGO, which is made by Nanlite, and it's a 5-foot tube. So that's how my lights go.
Yeah, and I have 2 Nanlite 100s on either right here, a Nanlite 68 over here, and a Nanlite Mix 60 behind me that's doing the blue thing. That's my lighting there. And go ahead, Bill.
So I have, let me see if I can switch to this. This is everything off, but you'll see in here that there are actually 2 little, I'm going to zoom in on them, panels. Those are my key lights actually on my face. I have an overall strip bank above me that has a Lowell, one of the new Tota LEDs inside of it that provides just overall fill to get the level up. And then that plus these 2 little ones, all the rest of these are just monitors that I'm looking at.
Danny?
Being in a small room, all I'm doing is bouncing an LED light off a wall that is about just 8 feet away from me.
That's great.
Just one light.
Yep, that's great. It looks great. Absolutely. Next question.
Joe Kidd from the Bay Area in California. I'd love a ruthless review of Apogee's HypeMic. Specifically, is it unwise to use it in an inbuilt DAC when quality and versatility are high priority?
Yeah, we'd have to test it. I mean, the hard part with mics is it's hard to test it unless you get them all in the same place. So, like to know whether it sounds good or bad, what we'd really want to do is put you in the environment that you're going to use it in, and have a couple other reference mics that you're going to use. So it might be an SM58 and a this and this and this. Okay, here's what you sound like, because it's hard to gauge how a mic sounds unless you're in the environment. You have 3 or 4 mics. Like I got the one that David Brady has, and I haven't gotten to. I keep on meaning to bring it in and set it up, but I'm going to set it up with an MV7 with the shiny mic with this, and so we can listen to all of them in the same space going into the same thing. And I think that's going to tell us a lot more about how it works. So that's what you need to do, is try to go against something else. Next question.
Josh Kaufman, Pittsburgh,
sorry.
PA.
I jumped, Carl. Go ahead, Carl. I missed you there.
Sorry.
So Apogee, the analog to digital converter in there is very high quality. This is Apogee. They make the Symphony, which is the DAC that's used in Abbey Road and all the studios in Abbey Road. It's essentially the capsule is not too bad. It's actually a very good quality mic for the price. It's much better if you're using it in like a mobile situation, or like what we're doing here. Like if you're on the hotel, like when Alex goes to a hotel, that'd be a really good mic rather than taking his 103. It's a very similar kind of capsule to the 103, just not as high quality. But the analog to digital converter in is very high quality compared to a Focusrite Solo, something like that.
Yeah, and I will say that, like, for instance, you do have to think about the nature of where you're going to use a mic. I would never take this mic out to do anything. like this is, I have to build, my whole room is built around this mic, to be honest. Like it sounds okay, but there's noise reduction, and then my room does not look pretty because there's a whole bunch of moving blankets around to kind of kill everything, because otherwise this will pick up everything. Next question.
And it's from Josh Kaufman, Pittsburgh, PA. What should be our default meters to include for future Ruthless reviews?
Well, I think we didn't get them in today, but normally just the meters that we have, I think, would be good. Just the typical meters that we've used, the LUFS meters we've used in the past would be good. Yeah, go ahead. You're going to say something, HypeMiC?
Yeah, the internet went down at home.
Oh, there we go.
so that took out the meters. So I apologize for that.
No worries. But typically we'd use those there. All right. Next question. Last question for the hour.
Josh Kaufman, Pittsburgh, PA again. Should we do a Ruthless behind the scenes to show the panelist setup?
We've done those in the past, and we should do them again. So we'll plan that in the next couple of weeks. Go ahead, Carl.
Yeah. So for me, the main thing, as Alex said, he's got moving blankets around him. I've actually got diffusion. So I've got like a 7x5 Calyx next to me, full of just stuff like albums and synthesizers and everything else. And I've got a bookcase right in front of me as well, and I've got a bookcase behind me. So a lot of diffusion in here. I've got a suspended ceiling, so there's heaps of diffusion in this room, so I'll never get any echoes. So if we do just show behind the scenes, that's one of the things I usually like to show off about this particular room I'm in, is that there's just no early reflections at all. It's not a dead room, because I don't want a dead room, but I do want a room that has enormous diffusion, essentially. That's what I have.
Yeah. Mitchell?
I was just going to point out, I tried to zoom back my lens a little bit to make myself smaller, and the teleprompter started shadowing the bottom of my screen. So I got to figure out how to deal with that.
Got to move further away. So there you go. See, it works perfectly. So anyway, that'll be the challenge. Yeah, and I think that hopefully this is useful for people. I think that we always get some comments, and I get some pings later that the Ruthless Reviews, we go through them, and we've all been through them a couple times. We play with little things, but it definitely helps a lot of other people think about like what we're looking at and how we're kind of approaching that puzzle. I do think that I think that the Ruthless Reviews have been instrumental in creating a show that just doesn't look like anything that we see anywhere else. Is us constantly, being willing to nitpick. This process, I think, is both good for all of us, and again, it really makes a difference when you're in a meeting and you come in looking like any of these frames that you see here today is not what most people look like when they come into meetings, and it definitely makes a difference. So I would highly recommend investing in that as you move forward. All right. I have to jump into a 9:00 meeting, so we're going to get out of here quickly. But I want to thank thank our producers for all the great questions, keeping everything moving forward. It was a great set of questions today. And thanks to the panelists. Can't do this without you. And thanks for being willing to go sit on the hot griddle for a little bit for everyone's benefit. So really well done. And of course, thanks to the production crew that made this all happen. Incredible that we do this 7 days a week and without a miss. We just keep going. So really, really well done to the folks in the back end. And now we're going to go ahead and jump into After Hours. We're going to get Mitchell a gray shirt. It's going to be like dark gray.
Don't be ruthless.
Dark gray. I don't think Mitchell knows how to whisper. No, he just shakes his head. He doesn't know. He doesn't know the secret. It's very important to be very good at whispering.
Don't you have a meeting?